Raise the flag.
Light the cauldron.
We declare the Games Odyssey open. Welcome to the Games Odyssey podcast, your home for stories of glory from the Olympics and Paralympics. I'm Jonathan Jordan.
And I'm Sarah Patton. We both love the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and we love history. But most of all, we love Olympic and Paralympic history.
From the epic and inspirational moments we all love, to the more bizarre and controversial moments, we're fascinated by it all.
Which is why we are on a journey through all of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, from the ancient Olympics held at Olympia, all the way to now.
All right, we are back again for some Summer Games discussion, and like Stockholm 1912 that we discussed a while back ago, today we're going to discuss another one-hit wonder, the Summer Olympic Games of 1928, hosted by Amsterdam, which is the only time the Olympics have been hosted by the Dutch. Well, at least so far. And to be completely honest, I knew absolutely zilch about these Olympic Games before doing the research. So cards on the table. I knew these games existed, obviously. Couldn't have told you a single thing about them. And even after doing the research, while they may be missing some of the drama that we've seen in previous games, I don't know, Sarah, is that necessarily a bad thing?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah. I'm kind of in the kumbaya mentality. I want everyone to have fun and get along. And right. So while some people may think without drama, there's not as much excitement, I'm okay with that. This is the good kind of excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have nothing to contribute in terms of knowledge about the Netherlands. I've never been there. I can't say I've done a ton of homework into their history or anything. Sarah, how about you?
Yes, I've actually spent about 2 months total in the Netherlands, about a month at a time in Amsterdam. And I love Amsterdam. I love the Netherlands. I love the culture. Of course, I was there in like the 2010s, which is such a weird thing to say. So I'm sure that 1928 was very different. But Amsterdam is a beautiful city. Canals everywhere. When you ask people where you're going for directions, instead of giving you street names, they're like, oh, you turn at that canal and then you go to that canal. And so it's very picturesque in that regard. It's a beautiful place. I'd go back in a heartbeat. So as far as the Olympic history there, I didn't get a chance to explore too much, but I did get a chance to see the Olympic Stadium. I've got an old picture in front of it, not the best quality, but I'll try to find it and put it up on our page.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, so I'd say I know a little bit about Amsterdam. I can get around. It's a good place. Yeah,
you've been there for sure. You know a lot more than I do just in that few minutes describing the city. So that's fun.
Yeah, the people are lovely. It's a beautiful culture.
It's good to know. So let's kind of give a little bit of an overview of the episode, and then we'll get into some highlights. So in 1928, the Dutch finally get the chance to host the Olympic Games after years of trying to throw their hat into the ring. The first standalone Summer Games would provide some new opening ceremony traditions and see the addition of even more women who finally we love that, who finally get to compete in athletics and gymnastics for the first time. So obviously there's a couple of highlights, I guess, kind of buried in the overview, but Sarah, take it away. What are some other big things that we need to know about Amsterdam 1928?
Yeah, we got some big ones. So the games ran from May 17th to August 12th with 2,883 athletes from 46 delegations competing in 109 medal events. These were the first Olympic Games to officially be designated as the Summer Games to help distinguish them from the Winter Games, just in case the lack of snow, ice, and figure skating didn't already tip you off.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Now, this is something I learned about last year, but I find this to be such a fascinating fact. This was the first time a cauldron was lit during the opening ceremony. This was also the games that standardized Greece marching in first, with the host country marching in last, which I love that. I love that became the precedent.
Yeah.
These were the first games to standardize the schedule of 16 days of competition instead of stretching them out across months and months of time. Yeah.
Thank goodness.
The number of women competing more than doubled as women were finally able to compete in gymnastics at the Olympic level, and the first time women were allowed to compete in track and field events. And also, this was the first time that the company Coca-Cola, who you may have heard of, sponsored the Olympic Games. We also saw the addition of a few new countries, Malta, Panama, and Rhodesia, which we now know as Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so these are some really fun traditions we're seeing pop up in here. Like you said, some things that we kind of recognize, like the cauldron being lit, Greece marching in first, and then, of course, the addition of more women into sports. So, you know, part of me feels a bit ashamed that I didn't know these things about the games before having to do the research on them, but it is really fun to see them happening. So we're going to get into some more about the background of how the games ended up in Amsterdam, but first we'll take a little bit of a break and be right back. So here's the deal. Amsterdam had actually been interested in hosting the Olympics before this. In fact, way back in 1912, a Dutch nobleman by the name of Frederick van Tully had proposed that the city should host, even though there wasn't even an Olympic committee for the Netherlands yet at the time. I mean, why wait on that? Committees are boring. And then during World War I, of course, the issue was dropped. And even though they were interested in hosting the 1920 games, they ended up supporting Antwerp to host the games instead, which we're not going to rehash that whole thing. You can go listen to that episode. But they were also interested in hosting in 1924. But you might recall that when hosting duties were being decided for 1924, Coubertin was like, nah, guys, Paris got this. But there was a condition made that Amsterdam could have the games in 1928. So when the decision for 1928 came around, there was one other serious bid put forward by Los Angeles. But the IOC did keep its promise and awarded the games to Amsterdam. Now, a weird but cool fact that I found is that so many cars were expected to show up for spectators. I mean, think about it, Sarah. Cars are still kind of a new thing at this point, so people weren't always showing up in cars before this, but so many cars were expected that the city added new parking lots and parking spots. And this is where the symbol of a white P on a blue background was used for the first time. And that's still the international symbol for parking. So I know that's an incredibly nerdy fact, but there you go.
Well, and I'm about to make it a little nerdier. So one thing I didn't talk about earlier with Amsterdam, in case you don't know this, is that it's super fascinating to me that they were focused on cars, because Amsterdam is notorious as a bike city. I've heard it said in jest that there's more bikes than people, but that might actually be true. I mean, there's bikes everywhere. I rode a bike to get around the city.
Yeah.
And that was just their culture. So I think that's super, super interesting. So yeah, I will always associate bicycles with Amsterdam. And if you ever see pictures of just hundreds or thousands of bikes in Amsterdam, that's why, because that's their culture. That's how they prefer to get around. It's a lot more efficient.
That's just a Tuesday in Amsterdam, is what you're saying. So
exactly.
Yeah. Also, maybe what's a little bit more interesting than the parking thing is that it was decided that there would be no Olympic village. Instead, most athletes stayed aboard ships that were moored in the Amsterdam harbor, which, based on your description of all the canals, makes complete sense. So I guess they had more of an Olympic shipyard than village, I guess. And what I thought what was interesting here with the whole Amsterdam Los Angeles situation is that it kind of reminds me a little bit of what happened with Paris Los Angeles hosting recently. So with the IOC saying, hey, one of you take this one of you take the other.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to press the pause button here because my wife texted me that there is a spider she needs to have killed.
Oh, no.
So we're going to take a little unplanned break right here, right now, so I can go do that.
I understand. This is an emergency.
And then we'll come back and we'll talk about the opening ceremony.
Okay. Good luck.
All right, we're back. The spider has been slain and dealt with. So let's get into the opening ceremony.
I'm glad that you were able to do that.
That's my main job here, is washing dishes and killing spiders. So
oh my goodness. Okay, we're gonna crawl our way into the opening ceremony, which was held on July 28th. And opened by Prince Hendrik, consort of Queen Wilhelmina. Basically, she gave him permission to open the Olympics in her place because she was on vacation in Norway and didn't want to interrupt her vacation. She was like, yo, hubby, you can go do this. Bye-bye. Which, I'm sorry. I'm going to look down on her a little bit because you missed the chance to open the Olympics. What is wrong with you? But this might help explain it. It was rumored by some that the Queen disapproved of the Olympic Games, believing that they were a celebration of paganism. Because of the whole Zeus worship thing from the ancient Olympics. But she participated in the closing ceremony and even gave out some of the medals. So maybe she wasn't so opposed to it. She just really needed a vacation.
Yeah.
Greece led the Parade of Nations in honor of the Greek heritage of the Olympics. And then the Dutch delegation entered last. This Greece first, host last protocol has been followed ever since.
Yeah, and again, it is fun to kind of see these traditions starting to come in here. But yeah, since we took an impromptu break already, let's go ahead and get into our participants in these games. Who was there? What did they do? All of that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, we're going to start with the women. Which, yay, we have more of them. So despite criticism and opposition, these were the first games to feature women in track and field events. But how did this happen? Well, long story short, since the International Amateur Athletic Federation did not allow women's athletics events, a group of women got together and said, fine, we'll make our own group. And they started up the International Federation of Feminine Sports. Yep, I love it. They organized and held their own events in both Paris and Sweden, and these events were such hits that the IAAF begrudgingly agreed to allow women's track and field, and then the IOC also begrudgingly agreed. So there's that. Some things you just have to do it yourself if you want to make a difference. But side note, my speculation is that they probably saw there was some money here because let's be real, money talks if they were that popular. Yeah. There were 5 total events women could compete in: the 100 meter, the 800 meters, high jump, discus, and the 400 meter hurdles. Not everyone was happy about this limited number of events. In fact, British women boycotted the games over the decision, so there were no British women competing in athletics. In Amsterdam, Helena Konpoka of Poland became the first female athletics gold medalist when she won the discus competition. And Lena Radka of Germany won gold in the 800 meters. Speaking of, there were some false stories circulated after the 800 meters that the women were completely exhausted by the event, and basically that women were just too frail for such a long distance. So after this, the longest distance the IOC would allow women to compete in was the 200 meters. It would stay that way until the 1960s, even though those reports were wrong. So stinking ridiculous.
Yeah.
Those poor, fragile women.
I know. Yeah. And, we'll see this, unfortunately, continue to be a theme, and the fight for, women to get into longer distances, which we'll get to all of that. But this is really kind of where it started, where, someone started circulating these stories that, man, it just looked like those women were just so exhausted at the end of 800 meters. Well, okay, to be fair, everyone looks exhausted at the end of any race, no matter what distance it is. Men and women, like they just ran a race. So anyway.
Yeah. We also had the return of women in fencing with one event, the individual foil. This was won by Helena Meyer of Germany. She was only 17 at the time and won 18 of her 20 bouts. In 1935, she was forced to resettle in the U.S. because she was Jewish. Despite this, she competed for Nazi Germany in 1936 in the same event where she would win silver. Some have called her the greatest female fencer of all time, and Sports Illustrated named her one of the top 100 female athletes of the 20th century. She's considered controversial because she was the only Jewish female athlete to compete for Germany at the Berlin Games, and she gave the Nazi salute during the medal ceremony. But she later said this gesture may have saved her family, who were in German labor camps. Some call her a traitor. Others say she was a pawn used by both the IOC and the American Olympic Committee to prevent an American boycott in 1936. Joseph Goebbels, head of Nazi propaganda, even sent out a message to German media that no comments were to be made about her non-Aryan ancestry. After the Games, she returned to the U.S. and became a U.S. citizen in 1941. She then moved back to Germany in 1952 and sadly passed away the following year of breast cancer. So what a life.
Yeah, she's an interesting figure for sure, especially, being a Jewish athlete who represented Germany in the 1936 games. And there has been a lot of discussion about what was her level of willingness in those games. And was she used as really just a tool at the end of the day, so that the Americans would show up and not boycott the games. So
does it feel familiar? And I know I'm jumping like almost 100 years here, but does it feel kind of familiar to the Beijing Games that we just had, the Winter Olympics, where a lot of people were doing a diplomatic boycott of China because of the Uyghur concentration camps, and then they ended up having some Uyghur citizens be part of lighting the torch because people took that as kind of like they were being used and manipulated to show, for China to show, oh, we're really not that bad. So
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would make that comparison. Just because they're two very different situations.
Sure.
But also because it wasn't really, as far as I know anyway, it wasn't really public knowledge that they were going to include some Uyghur people in the ceremony before it happened. Like, I didn't hear people talking about that as like, oh, but this is going to happen. Whereas here, like, Meyer was used to say, hey, we Nazis aren't really that racist. Look, we're going to have a Jewish athlete on our team. So see, Americans, you can trust us. Like it was very much a public display, the way that she was used. And then, I just can't imagine how she felt, again, having to give this Nazi salute. And again, like how voluntary was that? And was the decision to do that, as she later claimed, like, hey, I had family who were already in German labor camps, and this may have actually saved them because I did the salute. And if I didn't do the salute, like she knew they were in those camps. Like, they had that leverage over her. Right. So. No,
I think that's a good point. But yeah. You know me, I'm always like drawing parallels between history and modern history and seeing how certain things with the Olympic movement tend to repeat a little bit.
I mean, I definitely think there are some similarities to the situations, but I think in some ways her story is, I don't want to say worse because both are not great, right? But I feel like hers was very much like she was specifically plucked out because of her previous success here at Amsterdam. That she was very specifically chosen, like she is going to be the Jewish face of Nazi Germany for these games. And there's, I don't know, there's a whole other level of sickness to that. That's just different to me, but I don't know. Anyway.
Sorry, everybody. Yeah. Moving on.
Nope. All good. Yeah, we're going to kind of transition away from that. Talk about a couple of winning streaks that started here in 1928. So for the first time ever, India's field hockey team won gold. They would then go on to win gold at the next 5 Summer Olympic Games for field hockey. And then also the nation of Hungary would start a winning streak in the team saber event, winning all 7 golds from 1928 to 1960. So just dominant in that event as a team.
It's incredible.
But then let's go over to swimming. Speaking of winning streaks, we have Johnny Weissmuller showing up here again, who we talked about him back in 1924 Paris, and he adds 2 more golds to the 3 that he had already won over in Paris, defending his title in the 100-meter freestyle and also as part of the 4x200 relay team. Also in swimming, U.S. men swept the podium for the 100-meter backstroke with George Kojak winning gold. And then we're going to talk about, we mentioned Japan in our Winter Games episode. Here, Japan's Yoshiyuki Tsuruta won gold in the 200-meter breaststroke. And then over in women's swimming, I know we were talking about some of the other women's sports earlier, but we do have women's swimming again, of course. And so in the 100-meter freestyle gold, it got to stay with the U.S. team via Albina Osopowicz winning gold, and the women's team also won gold again in the 4x200 meter relay. So there's a couple more winning streaks. And then the Dutch team also had a champion in swimming in the form of Marie Baron, who won gold in the 100-meter backstroke and also 2 silvers in the 400-meter freestyle and the 200-meter backstroke. So she had a very successful swimming career. And then in diving, for men's diving, American Pete Desjardins won gold in the 3-meter springboard. So he was originally born in Manitoba, Canada, but he grew up in Florida. And then during the 10-meter platform event, he was placed second, with Farid Samaika of Egypt being declared the champion. But Sarah, get this. During the medal ceremony, as the Egyptian flag was being raised and their anthem being played, the judges reconsidered the scoring, and then they named Desjardins as the champion, bumping Samaika to second place.
That's so sad.
It is. And, you know, as much as I'm happy that, like, Team USA got another gold, there's a part of me that says, like, well, that's really not fair. Like, to take a fresh look at the results, like, while he's literally standing on the podium in first place with his flag going up, to be like, I don't know, guys, I think we got this wrong. Like, at that point, no, it's too late. Like, leave the results alone. Yeah. So I feel bad for Farid being bumped to second place, but anyway.
Just to have it done in the middle of your anthem. Ugh.
Yeah, it stinks. It stinks. So Egypt, we're sorry. We apologize, even though we didn't cause it to happen.
Yeah.
We still feel bad about it. So now in women's diving, American women also dominated, getting a podium sweep in the 3-meter springboard with Helen Meany winning gold. This was actually Helen's 3rd Olympic Games after competing in 1920 and 1924, but this was her first medal. So just goes to show, never give up, right? Just keep doing your thing. So
yeah, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, third time was a charm for her, which was great. U.S. women also won gold and silver in the 10-meter platform, with gold going to Elizabeth Becker Pinkston. She had also won gold in the 3-meter event back in Paris, so she finished her Olympic career with 3 medals total. And then while we're talking about aquatic-related sports, we'll just talk about rowing and sailing real quick. During the quarterfinals for rowing, Australian rower Henry Pearce stopped midway through the race to let a family of ducks pass by in front of him. And how wholesome is that? So I love it. And guess what? He still ended up winning both that race and then later on the gold in the final. So
he deserved that.
He did. So just, out there loving nature and nature loving him, apparently.
I know. That's so wholesome. That's the content we need.
Yeah. And then over in sailing in the 6-meter event, gold went to the team from Norway, which included Crown Prince Olav, who later became King Olav of Norway. So talk about a crowning achievement for him. Ha ha ha.
Well done. Well done.
So yeah, that kind of rounds out all of our, again, aquatic type events there. But let's take another little break. Hopefully no more spiders to kill this time. And then, Sarah, when we come back, we will talk about gymnastics, especially since women get to compete in it for the first time. All right? Yeah.
All right, we're going to flip out over gymnastics a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So in gymnastics, women were able to compete for the first time, but there was only one competition, the team event. The teams each had 12 members, though, so this contributed to the overall increase in women's participation since there were 11 countries total entered in the event. Gold went to the hometown favorites, the Dutch team, with Italy winning silver and Team Great Britain winning bronze. Over on the men's side, the Swiss dominated, winning gold in the men's team event, and also with Swiss gymnast Georges Mies winning the individual all-around gold and his teammate Herman Anguille winning silver. Out of the 21 total medals in men's gymnastics, the Swiss won 9 of them. Mies won a total of 4 medals for himself, 3 gold and 1 silver. Anguille also won 4, 2 gold, 1 silver, and 1 bronze. Georges Mies went on to become a coach and a sportswear designer, designing a new type of gymnastics trousers. This is a pretty cool way to keep going in your gymnastics career.
Yeah, it sounds very fitting for him.
Ha ha ha. Gosh, we are full of the jokes tonight. For the 1932 games, the Swiss were not able to send a team due to financial difficulties, but he volunteered to go on his own. His main reason for this, though, was because his brother had died unexpectedly while visiting in the U.S., so he went to retrieve his brother's body. But he did compete in the floor competition, where he won silver and then chose to withdraw from the rest of the competition. He also competed in Berlin, 1936, where he won 2 medals, a silver in the team event and another gold in the floor. After that, he worked as a coach and as an official for the Red Cross. He also wrote books on sports medicine, started up several private schools, and also coached tennis. So yeah, he wasn't busy or anything.
Not at all.
Just making an impact. He lived a very long life, dying of a stroke at the age of 94.
Yeah, so, I mean, definitely a notable figure in gymnastics, especially for the country of Switzerland, obviously. And making an impact in all kinds of ways, which, as you just mentioned, like schools and sports medicine and tennis thrown in there. Like, what in the world, dude?
It's really special.
Stop being so good at everything.
I know.
But anyway, let's get into athletics. Because the Amsterdam Games were actually the first to standardize the 400-meter track for the athletics competition. So, yeah, previous games had, tracks of just whatever size the host country wanted to make it in the stadium, even if the events themselves had been standardized. So we're going to talk about Japan again real quick, because in the triple jump, Mikio Oda of Japan beat out American Levi Casey by 4 centimeters to win. This made him not only Japan's first Olympic champion, but the first Olympic champ for any Asian athlete in an individual event. His winning distance was 15.21 meters. And I thought this was really cool. But in 1964, when Tokyo hosted the Summer Games for the first time, the Olympic flag was raised to 15.21 meters in honor of his triple jump victory. I just think that's so cool that they honored him as their first Olympic champ in that really creative way. So while he competed in 3 Olympic Games, this was his only medal. So glad that he made an impact that way. And then another familiar name for us, Pavo Normi. He won his final gold medal here, his 9th BTW, in the 10,000 meter race. Sarah, do you wonder ever if he was disappointed that he didn't hit double digits with the gold medals?
I wonder. This guy, he just keeps winning.
Yeah.
I don't know. 9 is pretty impressive.
It's really impressive. Like, there's nothing to be disappointed about there. But anyway, it crossed my mind, because I think that's how my brain would work if I was in that position. I'd be like, 10. Yeah, but anyway, that's just me. And then also, I want to talk for a second about Canada's Percy Williams, because we love a good underdog story here. And Percy here, our Canadian friend, he had a double underdog victory. He surprised everyone when he won gold in both the 100 meter and the 200 meter events. Now, this was despite the fact that he had suffered from a rheumatic fever at the age of 15, and doctors had actually urged him to avoid strenuous activity for the rest of his life. Oops. Anyway, he returned to Canada as a hero for his 2 surprise victories, and these ended up being his only Olympics, but still very successful. So I love that for him.
Yeah, we love the stories like that.
And then over in the marathon, the winner was Algerian Bouira El Ouafi. And, well, so here's the deal. He was Algerian by birth, but he was representing France because this was when the French were still occupying Algeria at the time. Okay, so he had been noticed for his athletic ability while he was serving in a French military regiment there in Algeria. And then he was sent to compete in the marathon in Paris 1924, where he actually finished 7th, which not shabby at all. Now, here in Amsterdam, he ran behind the leading pack of runners for about 75% of the race, and he only took the lead in the last 5 kilometers. And again, even though he was Algerian, he was representing France, and he ended up actually being the only gold medal for France for Amsterdam 1928. After these games, he actually went on a tour of the U.S., but unfortunately, this disqualified him as an amateur because he was earning money while he was on that tour. And then afterwards, he returned to Paris, where he opened a cafe. He was then forgotten about until 1956, when another Algerian, Alain Mamoun, also won the marathon. Well, this prompted a search for him. People wanted to know what he was up to, and unfortunately, he was found living destitute as a pauper at the time. And then I wish we could say his story had a more positive ending, but a few days after his 61st birthday, he was actually killed while he was in a cafe. There are some varying reports on why this happened. Some say that he was actually specifically targeted by the National Liberation Front because he was refusing to support their cause. Others say that he was just an innocent bystander who got caught in the middle of a family quarrel. Either way, his life had kind of a sad end, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, I hate kind of ending these parts of the discussions on a sad note, but I think what we can celebrate is here we have someone of a heritage who accomplished something major that we haven't heard of anyone else from his heritage doing before. So this is a huge breakthrough for Algerian athletes at a time when they weren't even free to compete underneath their own flag. And so I think that in of itself is something for him to be remembered for as a leader really in the sport.
Yeah, there's no doubt he made an impact, and that's really cool to get to see.
As sad of a note as that is, rather than taking a break on that, let's try to end in a little bit of a happier spot. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about how things wrapped up at these games, medal tally, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So the games closed on August 12th with the final medal table tally looking like this. The United States won 58 total medals with 24 golds. Germany won 41 total with 12 gold. Finland won 25 total with 8 gold. France and Sweden both won 25 total with 7 gold, though France won more silver than Sweden.
Yeah, so I should clarify, because we just talked about how El Wafi was the only gold for France. So yeah, both countries won 25 medals total. Sweden won 7 gold. France only won that 1 gold, but they had a lot more silver medals than Sweden. So I should probably clarify that. Otherwise, people are like,
thanks for
inconsistent. Yeah, anyway.
No,
sorry.
I know. No, you're good. Thanks for clarifying that. The primary legacy of these games is that they are the only time the Netherlands has hosted the Olympics so far. But they do tend to get forgotten about because, like we said earlier, they were fairly low drama, well-run Olympic games. So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. And it is kind of sad that as humans, we tend to just kind of gravitate towards negativity sometimes and the drama, because I don't know, we get this weird thrill and excitement from it. And then really well-run events like this one and like Stockholm get kind of forgotten about. So I'm glad that we got to talk about it and hopefully help people remember how good these games actually were. And hey, Amsterdam, maybe you should consider throwing your hat in the ring again someday.
Right.
So anyway, if you do want to learn more about the 1928 Summer Games in Amsterdam and see some of the events for yourself, the official film is on HBO Max, which again, we're not sponsored by them. Someone over at HBO apparently really loves the Olympics, and that's where they have all these official films. So there is a link in the show notes if you are a subscriber to that. But if you enjoyed this episode,
and we really hope you did,
then please come back next time, because we're going to be heading to the US for the 3rd Winter Games hosted in Lake Placid. And I'm here for it. I'm excited about that one in particular.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah. But until then, I'll see you later. The Games Odyssey podcast is a production of Wardrobe Media, LLC. This episode was written, hosted, produced, and edited by Jonathan Jordan and co-hosted by Sarah Patton. Show notes, including research sources and transcripts, can be found on our website, gamesodyssey.com. Olympic is a trademark of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, USOPC. Any use of Olympic in the Games Odyssey podcast is strictly for informational, commentary, and educational purposes. The Games Odyssey podcast is not an official podcast of the USOPC and is not sponsored, endorsed, or officially affiliated with the USOPC or the International Olympic Committee or International Paralympic Committee. The content of Games Odyssey podcast does not reflect the opinions, standards, views, or policies of the USOPC, and the USOPC in no way warrants that content featured in the Games Odyssey podcast is accurate.